Welcome back. This is question number 5 of the Summa Theologica. I'm Dave Palmer. Thanks so much for journeying through the Summa. And this is a journey, and I think Thomas intended it to be a journey because it is leading us to God. It is a blueprint, in a sense, of how we live a life desiring God, seeking God, and ultimately, through God's grace, resting in Him. Okay, so question 5 is one of my favorite questions of the Summa because, as I alluded to before, there are 7 attributes of God that are covered in 9 questions of the Summa. Okay, we're still in the treatise on the one God. There's 7 attributes. We had simplicity, we had perfection. Okay, the very next attribute that he's going to get into is God's goodness. But what he does here is something very interesting because he pauses. And instead of going strictly from perfection of God to goodness of God, he puts something in between. And this is a question where he says, goodness in general. Why would he do this? He's talking about God, right? He's talking about the attributes of God. And he stops and says, okay, before we get to the goodness of God, let's talk about the goodness of general. And I put this picture up here because, I do a search for, like pictures that reflect goodness. And you got this man and his wife and their daughter, and they're, look like they're going camping or for a picnic or something like that. And, this is just good. This is a good thing. And marriage is good and children are good. And so, what does it mean? How does that goodness that we experience every single day of our life reflect our God? Okay, and that's exactly what he's getting at. Is he's saying, before I go into the goodness of God, I want to let you know that the goodness that you experience in the world, the goodness that you experience every single day, is a reflection of God. So if you want to know God, that goodness is everywhere in your everyday life. Okay, that's the point of this question. He's saying, the best thing we can do is go to Mass, we can go to adoration, we can adore God, we can love God, we can seek God. Yes, absolutely, perfectly right? But he's also saying, you know what? Every single moment in your life gives you an opportunity to experience God through his effects. And I'm gonna devote an entire question with, I think, like 6 articles to this. Okay, so let's get right to it. Whether goodness really differs from being. This is a fascinating question because when you get into philosophy, you're going to find out that the word goodness is a powerful word. Okay, if you go back to Plato had the realm of forms. Okay, we'll talk more about this as we go along, but he had the realm of forms. Okay, the world, the physical world were shadows, and then you had these forms, a realm of forms. The highest of the forms was the good, the form of good, which basically he identified with God, right? And being is a word that means existence. Okay, so being and existence basically is the same thing. Okay, ontology is the study of existence. There's a philosopher called Martin Heidegger who lived in the 20th century, and his entire philosophy had to do with this word being. Okay, what is being? In German it was Dasein, being there. What does it mean that we exist, that we live in this world, we are, right? So these are 2 power-packed words in philosophy, goodness and being. And Thomas here basically says they're kind of like the same thing, because to be is good. And the other thing that this highlights about St. Thomas Aquinas that I always say whenever I teach philosophy and I teach St. Thomas Aquinas is that Thomas is a optimistic philosopher. Okay, there's a lot of philosophers in the history of the world that are very pessimistic. Jean-Paul Sartre is pessimistic. Arthur Schopenhauer was pessimistic. Albert Camus was pessimistic. There's a lot of pessimism within philosophy. St. Thomas Aquinas was not a pessimist. He was an optimist. And this is an article in the Summa that really reflects that optimism, because goodness and being are like the same thing. That's what he's getting at here, okay? There's very little distinction between them. And then article number 2, he kind of geeks out and he says, okay, it's kind of like the whole chicken and the egg thing, which one comes first? Does goodness Is goodness first or is being first? And I don't know if this is terribly, terribly important. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But he says, in idea, being is prior to goodness. Okay, so existence comes first and then goodness. Okay, we make a value judgment about something. We're attracted to something because it's good, but it has to exist, right, before it can be determined to be good. Article 3 I love because he says, is every being good? And whenever I teach a class and I tell them that St. Thomas Aquinas, being a very optimistic philosopher, is going to say that every being is good. Okay, here I'm quoting him here. Every being as being is good, for all being as being has actuality and is in some way perfect, since every act implies some sort of perfection. Okay, he also says, everything's created by God, and God wouldn't create something bad. And what I was going to say a moment ago is that whenever I ask my students, before I show any pictures or anything like this, I'll say, if there's anything that's like bad, what would it be? Like can you think of any creature that you would just rather not exist? And the number one the number one answer I always get is mosquitoes. Okay, snakes, scorpions, tornadoes, hurricanes, but mosquitoes is number one. Nobody can find a reason why mosquitoes are good. Okay, but by definition, because God created them and because they have existence, because they have actuality, they're good. All right, so it again changes the way that you see the world. All right, now here's another really power-packed question in the Summa: whether goodness has the aspect of a final cause. I can't emphasize enough how important this question is, and this is, I don't know if it's the most important article that we've had so far, but it's close to it because of the practical application and implications of this question. All right, what this means is, okay, the reason I have a picture, do you know who this is? This is Aristotle. Okay, and Aristotle, Greek philosopher, I don't know what, 3rd century, 4th century BC. He was Plato's student. Plato was Socrates' student. So these three geniuses all lived within 100 years of each other. But Aristotle had this explanation of all things through 4 causes. Okay, 4 causes, 4 causes. And they were the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. I won't get into all the details right now because they'll be coming back a lot, okay? But final cause had to do with purpose. It had to do with end. It has to do with meaning. What's the meaning? What's the purpose of something? And this is so important. It has to do with teleology. It has to do with what is our end. Okay, telos means end. And here Thomas is saying goodness has the aspect of a final cause, which means that we are drawn to goodness. We are drawn to it, okay? We desire it. And remember what he also said is that goodness and being are basically like the same thing, which means existence and goodness are basically the same thing, right? He also is going to say in the next question that God is good. So what he's saying in this question of the Summa here, before going into the goodness of God, is he's saying the whole world is good. Everything is good. Everything that has existence is good. Everything is a reflection of God. And so therefore, everything reflects our purpose and our end, because everything without exception is leading us to God. That's the whole point of this question of the Summa, okay? If you want to just distill it down, and everything without exception. Okay, I know I'm repeating myself. Okay, let me go through the next couple of things. Whether the essence of goodness consists in mode, species, and order. Okay, so I'm not going to get into this too much. Everything is said to be good insofar as it is perfect, for in that way only is it desirable. So what he's doing now is he's dividing up the different aspects of goodness. Now, this is important. I'm not trying to brush over it, okay? But it's one of those things where, again, this is the gist. I'm just trying to give the basic details here. Article 6, whether goodness is rightly divided into the virtuous, the useful, and the pleasant. The reason I put a couple here, a romantic couple, married, dating, whatever, is that this is so important. If I may just read this to you real quickly, this plays so much importance, okay? The ultimate term of movement can be taken in two ways, either as the thing itself towards which it tends, place or form, or state of rest in that thing. Okay, so we move towards the good and we rest in the good, all right? As a means by which something tends towards another is called the useful. Okay, that's use. You never want to, no person in a relationship would want to be just useful, okay, that they're just being used, but that's directing us towards something else, right? As a means by which something tends towards another is called useful, okay? As a thing towards which, for its own sake, the appetite tends is called the virtuous. Okay, for its own sake. For the virtuous is that which is desired for its own sake. This has so much to do with like John Paul II's love and responsibility, theology of the body, loving something for the sake of itself. Even Immanuel Kant, in his second categorical imperative, talked about this, that the human person has value in and of itself, right? And finally, but that which terminates the movement of the appetite is the form of rest in the thing desired, and it's called the pleasant. This also is going to have a lot to do with the theological virtues, faith, hope, charity. Faith is the intellectual knowledge of something and the assent. Hope is the desire for it. Charity is resting in it. Okay, that would correlate with the pleasant. It all ties together. The good is such an important concept. Like I said, Plato was talking about it, 400 years before Jesus Christ was born. Very, very important concept. Okay, so this sets the stage for Thomas in the next question to say, God is good. What's the point in this question? Saying, yeah, God is good, but he has presented his goodness in the world, and we can come to know so much about God in the things that we desire, but we have to connect those desires to the living God. Thanks for watching. God bless you.